the ball, I fumbled it and was knocked down enthusiastically by a 12-stone boy who already had a moustache. Do you have stones here, or do you just do kilos? Anyway, really big. This is based on autobiography. There was a kid at our school who had a moustache. He's in prison there. Simon Borman. When it wasn't his fault. Looking back, it was his parents. When at last it was time to go, I ran to the pavilion where we were meant to change before being ferried back to school in ancient creaking buses. The changing room smelled sourly of sweat and the liniments used by older players. The stench of sport. More than 40 years on, I doubt they've got rid of it even now, so densely did it hang in the air. That's not how I wrote the sentence, but I fucked it up and looked at the wrong line, so I had to backpedal, so I rearranged the sentence before your eyes there. I wouldn't write, so densely did it hang in the air, but I had to do that for grammar. This is not just a reading, this is live stuff. This is you're watching the book evolve. Now, this is true. Now I'm going to see a sentence and think, oh, I should have written that differently. It's frustrating. Sometimes the class troublemakers would sweep your clothes off the bench into the puddles. This was called puddling, and everyone went out of their way to be friends with the boys who were best at it. This is the 60s, this is quite genteel. This didn't happen at my school. At my school, the troublemakers punched you in the face. That afternoon, my fingers were so leaden with cold that I struggled to do up the buttons on my shirt and saw with alarm the other boys getting ahead of me in the race to be dressed. My right boot was tied with a double bow, and I'd run the laces along the underside of the boot to make sure they stayed fastened. One of the pieces of advice my dad had given me on my first day. Now mud was packed so thickly along the bottom of the boot that I couldn't get at the laces, and my freezing fingers tugged in vain at the knot. I tugged at the boot, picked in vain at the knot, it should be. I tugged at the boot more and more furiously. It was so filthy that it was impossible to grip it. I sat in my shirt, tie, shorts and boots, comically half-dressed, mud on my hands, feeling the grip of panic. The engines of the buses were growling outside. The quickest boys were already on their way. One or two glanced pityingly at me. The changing room emptied, the boot was stuck. I wanted to weep. In desperation I tottered outside, my boots as useless as ice skates on the hard ground. I had no plan, just a vague hope of finding a teacher who might help me discreetly, but then I caught sight of Max, his brother. He was walking with a mate called Roland, who was sometimes to be found lurking around our kitchen, accepting handouts of cake from Mum. Now he cupped an illicit cigarette in his hand. "Max!" I called. "Hey," said Roland with a mocking grin. "Is that your brother?" Max shrugged and walked on as if I were not there. "Yeah, it is," I called. "Max!" "I believe it is your brother, Kitchen," said Roland, clawing the hair out of his eyes. "Good detective work," said Max, still not looking round. "Max, help!" I shouted, but the two of them struck on their way. My cheeks burned. The wind whistled through the pavilion and lashed at my exposed legs. The bus driver honked at me to hurry up. I went back into the changing room, gathered up my jumble of muggy sportswear and hobbled miserably across the car park. The sight of me half-dressed brought a throaty chorus of mirth from the 30 or so boys on the bus. Even the teacher broke into a grin. "Interesting interpretation of the school uniform," he said. "Might you have taken off your boots and put your trousers on?" "I couldn't get them off," I muttered. This was received with even more laughter. I sat in the one remaining seat next to an unpopular, odd-smelling boy called Stevens, looked out of the window and pretended not to be crying. When we got back to school, things were even worse.